Morning everyone, it's Thursday before Good Friday and you're not going to hear from me for a while because the holiday. Rubbing it in there a bit, I know, because you don't have a holiday being in emergency services, but you still get the drift. There's two contributions to the discussion that I want to talk to you about today, both of which were just jaw-droppingly interesting. I know I say this every week, but every week I'm kind of astonished by the quality of the stuff that's coming in here. The thoughts, the things that I'd never thought of, and the mental images that kind of terrified the life out of me, really. But someone wrote in about confidentiality and made some really good points as well. And you know, that interest and tension that we all have, that you all have who work in the National Health Service, of yes, pride that there's universal care for all and that nobody needs to worry about the financial implications of their care for medical bills, but also embarrassment really at how thin some of that care gets spread sometimes, and how, you know, sometimes the side gets let down a little bit. What came across from this correspondence about confidentiality was, well, he laid it out on the line really. He feels that it's hard to draw moral absolutes if you're working out there as a paramedic in frontline services, that all your moral reasoning is going to be, to one degree or another, relativistic, that nothing's quite right, nothing's quite wrong, it just depends on the sort of mucky and messy individual circumstances of the day. I take that point, but then again, this correspondence, Mr. Correspondent, I want you to consider in the next bit of your letter to me, you kind of contradict that really, because you say that if you came across a situation where, you know, for instance, you went into someone's house and there was a big stack of cocaine there, you would have no hesitation about ringing the police and letting them know, and that the only thing that you thought might compromise that would be worried that your man, the dealer, might come round to you knowing that you'd put the word into the police and he might come looking for you. There didn't seem to be much doubt about what the right thing to do morally was there. You're pretty much convinced that there was only one line of action to take, and that was the morally right action. I would have been more interested to know what you thought of situations where there was less drugs. I mean, certainly when I've been speaking to nurses more or less break down into two parties, really. There's the hardliners who would report absolutely anything that came in the way of drug misuse, and then there's the liberals who basically regard drug use, even drug supply, as a social problem, not a medical problem, and therefore, because it's not a medical problem, it's not my job to intervene. The person probably didn't ring me up for anything to do with drugs, and therefore, unless I'm asked, I'm not going to get involved. So I would have been interested to know what you would have thought about a lower level. I mean, you know, nobody's gonna say you've done the wrong thing if you come in and there's 2 tons of cocaine in the garage. That's a relatively easy one to deal with. A gram, on the other hand, you know, I wonder if you would have taken the same attitude for a gram, but you know. The other points that got made this week were about honesty and truth-telling. And what my correspondent here, and absolutely, I've got to tell you, this one was such an interesting read, although a lot of it I can't actually discuss because the points were made which you wouldn't want spreading round. But she felt that there was every justification in being economical with the truth. That if somebody's in the back of the ambulance there who's clearly suffering from a large-scale heart attack, there really is no point in saying, I hope your affairs are in order because you might die in another 3 minutes. That the only approach really for you to take is, well, I think that you're sick, but we're going to do everything we can for you in the next few minutes. There's no real need to rub it in their face. And if there are broader questions asked, then about a person, am I going to die from this? Is this going to kill me? Then this is really the treating physician's job to be talking about this, not the paramedic. And you make a very interesting point in this, that really the customer is not going to be looking to you for definitive diagnosis and prognosis. To an extent, the fact that you are primarily involved in transport means that you're kind of shielded from these difficult decisions, what to tell when. Interestingly, while we're on the subject, it's I'm going back to one of our previous lessons, where patients aren't given enough information about their condition and where they kick off later on. By and large, the problem gets tended to be dealt with as a problem of negligence, rather than as a problem of, for instance, this undermines my consent. What it tends to be dealt with is that a job wasn't done properly, and the job in this case is given important medical information. I like the point made in this one that the truth has to be tailored to who is going to be hearing it. That's an interesting one. Never heard of that one before. For instance, my correspondent says that it's the information that you're going to give on the street to a scally in Kenny, as it was put to me, will need to be pretty short, pretty swift, pretty in the nose. Whereas for an elderly old lady, it needs to be more political. It needs to be more tailored. It needs to be gentler in some respects, if the message is going to get across at all successfully. Yeah, good point. And then the same correspondent talks about a haunting real-life situation as a paramedic, where she points out that, in contrast to doctors and in contrast to nurses, paramedics very frequently don't have the luxury of what you might call an interview. That, all this is taking place on the streets in the most unpredictable and the least controllable way that you can imagine. And it's not an ideal situation to be entirely confident that you always get it right. And she says that in some respects the issue in all these matters boils down to brute facts. Listen, if it's any consolation to you, I think everyone who works in the health context has these sorts of experience, and everyone is kind of haunted by some ghost or another. I know I certainly am. But I don't envy you. I really don't envy you. That one sounded a particularly difficult one to deal with. But I'm completely reassured by the fact that you found that situation so troubling, and it has bothered you. What sort of a person would you need to be for an event like that to go past without you giving it a second thought? But there you are. See you next week, everybody, unless I get something very interesting in the meantime. And see what you think about the next lesson. Bye now.